some of you probably know, we have the UI testing toolbox by Lombiq, which lets you do UI testing. And one problem that I have found occasionally, but in that time when that happens, it's really annoying, is that basically the Orchard core process and the UI testing process runs in the same app. So the two things run in the same process. So you can't actually just pause testing and continue running the web application itself if you want to try things out. So for that, I have added this. I've created a method that goes to switch to interactive. And what it does is that if you run the test, now you're able to pause at that point. It's kind of like the spiritual equivalent of debugger. Oh, is it starting? Yeah, it's just so okay. So like going into the debugger from code, but it's not going into the debugger. It actually just pauses the test thread, so you can still interact with this, and opens up a separate tab where it tells you what is going on. And then, for example, if you want to, one use case, for example, is to go to admin in a new tab. And then in this test, in this test, we added a bunch of content items. So, for example, you want to check that this one has all the data, or it has the data you expect. Then you can do it now. You can edit stuff, which wouldn't be good for you for testing, but maybe you want to check something just in case, or check your configuration if your features are enabled as expected, that kind of stuff. So once you're done with your things, you can just close this by clicking continue test, and then it, as the name says, continues the test. And if you didn't mess with the initial window, the first tab where the test is going to run, or in this case, this method navigates to a new tab, new location in the tab anyway, then it will seamlessly continue. And once you feel like everything works as expected, you can remove it, and your debug session is concluded. And how it works is really just uses the shortcuts, Lombiq Test UI shortcuts module, and it just displays this view, and has a simple boolean as a singleton service registered. So you update this using controller actions. And the actual method that you invoked here, what it does is it opens that tab and then just continuously invokes the API method, which just accesses the status variable and then returns it as JSON. So yeah, it's just a small thing, but it can be a lifesaver, because otherwise, what can you do? Like insert task delay with some random value and then be stressed about it. That's not very good. And I have used it since in live debugging, so it is actually practical. Yeah, I think that's it.
It looks like you've been there.
Yeah.
And you had to implement something to help you test or decide with data. I have one comment on the implementation. It's a stupid thing, I will say, but if you look back at your interface that you showed us with the enabled property, I don't think you need an interface. It's totally fine to just create a class, interactive node status accessor, with no interface. Just register the class directly and resolve the class directly. Because I'm pretty sure that you will never, ever have a different implementation than the interactive models that you get to solve.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of enterprisey.
And in Ultracore, we
the good thing about that approach is that you don't have to think about if it should be or not, shouldn't be, and faster code reviews, that kind of stuff. So I don't mind it, but yeah, I agree, it's technically not necessary.
But yeah, in Ultracore, we implemented too many interfaces also for things that we know just for abstracting for sure, maybe for testing also, but sometimes when you don't need to mock it, to re-implement it, the interface is too much. So just in this case, that's typically an example where, but yeah, for consistency, as you said, like, why is this one doesn't have an interface?
Yeah, also cool thing that we have the Lombiq analyzers pre-configured with a role that forces you to document all interfaces. So if I just create a class, then I don't have to document it and be lazy, and that's not good.
The analyzer should tell you if the class is public, then it should have documentation. Otherwise, you just make it internal or private, and then you don't have to document it, because if it's internal or private, it means there must be a public interface that has documentation. But if it's
but you don't usually like document models, for example, and those kind of have to be public.
Then you should. Why? Like you have documentation on your public property here enabled. Why not on the model? It's the same
because
reason.
in most cases the models, they are kind of
if you have
self-explaining.
If you have a reason to document a property on an interface, then the same reason, whatever you tell me, you apply it to the property on the model. Whatever the reason is, like you want it or you like chocolate, whatever, is the same thing. So yeah, if it's public, it's documented.
I see you feel strongly about this.
And in the Estimate core repository, that's also a way for us to not have to write documentation. We just make the thing private. It reminds us that, okay, doesn't make sense to write documentation, so this must be private. Like nobody should care about what, public documentation. Like code comments, fine, but public documentation for API documentation. That's why we put things private, and we don't forget about putting things private. Like your implementation here, you showed me it was public. Maybe it should be private or internal. You just want to expose the interface.
I see.
Yeah. Well, experiences divergent. You have different reflexives and rules. That's okay. Thank you, David, for that.
Yeah, thanks for your time.